And we're back for another episode of the Conscious Queries podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Persicino. Thank you for joining us. Remember to like and subscribe. And we have Patreon episodes coming out every week, so keep a lookout for that. All right, with me today, we have the one, the only, Gilles Lessard.
That's a big title.
Right? Okay, so here he is in the studio, back from his journey of 52 days from, trekking and being the ultimate voyageur. So let's bring him in and see what he has to say. Let's give us a little bit of what your trip was about.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me again, Dom.
Yeah.
Pleasure coming here a second time. So what basically our trip, few of my buddies and I, we were just graduating from university, and we wanted to celebrate our graduation by going on a trip. And then we had all respective trips planned out. Me and a few buddies were going to go across the Atlantic on a sailboat and then go to Europe and have fun there in a while. My other buddy, he was going to walk across North America for 6 months.
Right.
So something happened. I forget exactly what, but we couldn't do it anymore. COVID happened. It's not obvious enough. But yeah, right. COVID happened. So no, we couldn't go anywhere. Couldn't go internationally. So we figured, hey, let's do something nationally. That'd be just as much of an adventure. So I figured it'd be fun if we, take the old, maybe some of the old fur trading routes and the routes that the indigenous people, even before the fur traders, took, and paddle from Thunder Bay all the way to Winnipeg. So that was the idea. And then slowly we were trying to plan it. And then we ended up doing it. And it was incredible. It was a month and a half, 7 weeks total of just paddling and just being in the bush and not worrying about anything else in the world. It was a really good vacation. It was fantastic.
So my first thing is, what did you bring for food, and how much food did you bring?
Oh, that's a good question. So for the food, we knew we need to do some sort of resupplies because bringing 7 weeks of food with you is a lot of food. You know? So what we did is that we had set up resupplies for every 2 weeks about. So our first leg from Thunder Bay to, just south of Thunder Bay on the Pigeon River to Atikokan, we had with us 2 5-kilogram bags of flour and 8 pounds of lard. So that was for our lunches because we would make bannock. Mm-hmm. So if anybody doesn't know what bannock is, it's just an unleavened flatbread made of most traditionally grease, like a fat, flour, and water and salt. Right. And then we had that for our lunches. Every single day for 52 days, we had bannock. It was fantastic. we had it with light peanut butter, and I say light peanut butter because I was in charge of buying all the dry food, and I don't grocery shop. Yeah. And I would just buy the cheapest things there were, and it so happens that I bought light peanut butter, so 25% less fat, which isn't the best thing when you're doing a hike. You want as much fat as you want, right?
You want those calories.
You want those calories.
Yeah.
So they started calling me Captain Blue Cap because. All the peanut butter jars that were light had this blue cap on it. So bannock, light peanut butter. We had brown sugar on top and some nuts and some dried fruit. That was our lunch. For breakfast, it was mostly always oatmeal. And then we had, we always brought enough. We brought a dry pancake mix for one pancake breakfast, like on a day off. Yeah. And we'd be able to take our time to slowly get ready in the morning and make pancakes. Yeah. And for supper, we had dehydrated a lot of our own meals. Before, so we started dehydrating about a month and a half before we left, and I had dehydrated some curry. Joey, he dehydrated a lot of some pad thais and some spaghetti and meat sauce, and then Aubry, he had dehydrated some chilies, some chili actually, not just chilies, right. Chili, and then what else? He dehydrated a whole bunch of stuff. One of the best meals that Aubry dehydrated was a recipe he found online for anybody who wants to go hiking. It's a fantastic recipe. You go to the store, you buy stovetop stuffing, like the prefabricated stuffing. Mm-hmm. You buy dried mashed potatoes. Those packets just add water and you have instant mashed potatoes. Mm-hmm. And then cranberries and gravy base and dried turkey, and you mix that together, and it's just powder, right? Right. Because all it is just instant stuff. Wow. Then when you add hot water, all of a sudden you have Thanksgiving dinner. It's like this mush. It's like a mush of Thanksgiving dinner, but it's fantastic. I mean, when you're hiking, you're not eating anything. But that was good. That was good.
That's
but yeah,
great.
so that was our food. It was a lot of dehydrated stuff, bannock for lunch, and oatmeal in the morning. And then we had it in 60 liter barrels.
Right.
And then, like I said, 2 weeks resupply. And then we also, and the resupply, we would get all of our dehydrated stuff. And then we'd stop by the local grocery store to buy some snacks and a few extra, we would call them fresh meals.
Yeah.
Or just meals that we bought the ingredients and prepared.
Right then and there.
Right then and there. That wasn't pre-dehydrated. So that consisted of pea soups, beef stroganoff. Like I mean, a type of beef stroganoff. It wasn't like real beef stroganoff. It was like beef jerky and like canned soup. But beef stroganoff, and then calzones, which was a fun one. We were able to make calzones twice. First time we tried to make calzones, it wasn't a great idea to make calzones that specific day because it started raining.
Oh, yeah.
So it was hard to have everything's wet, and you're trying to roll out this pizza dough, which is just bannock, because that's all we eat, bannock. And then the tomato sauce and stuff. Oh, it was hilarious, but it worked out and they were delicious. So
good. Well, that's unbelievable, and I guess that answers my questions of how'd you got your food. The one thing that sketches me out the most about doing the partage and all that is that it's one thing to pick up your canoe and your backpack and to bring it and to go for a few kilometers. But it's one thing to do that and have to do the trip multiple times and leaving back equipment and saying, what if something comes through my stuff or takes my food barrel? I'm basically in the woods without any food then.
Right.
Does that worry you at all, or is it?
Actually,
what if you go back and you lose it, or?
Yeah, it really wasn't a worry for us at all, because we were 5 people.
Okay.
In 2 canoes. So I had a Souris River. I had bought a Souris River canoe with my parents, an 18.5 Quetico, so it has 3 seats. And my cousin and Joey, my friend. Well, they're both my friends. My cousin, my friend as well. Anyways, that's another joke. But me and my cousin my cousin and his friend, they bought a canoe as well, a Souris River 17. And so they were 2 in that canoe. And we only had 5 bags. So we had 3 dry bags. I had my own dry bag. Jesse and Jess, they were sharing a dry bag. And Joey and Aubry were sharing a dry bag. And then we had 2 food barrels. So what happened is that one person would take a barrel, another person would take the barrel, and then the other 3 people would take each a dry bag. And then there was always my dry bag, and Joey and Aubry's dry bag was always lighter. It was always lighter than Jesse and Jess's. Jesse's and Jess's. Okay. Because he had a lot of film equipment because he was making a film at the same time for a trip. So then you would take the canoe on top of that dry bag. So actually, we were able to do 1-shots for the entire trip.
Wow.
The only times where we didn't do 1-shots is because the partage was, I don't know, maybe 25 meters or 50 meters, and you could just see on the other side.
Right.
So it was just like hop up, bring some stuff, and then bring some other stuff.
Right, that makes sense. But
in general, like, I guess if you're afraid of specifically of the food, you can always bring your food barrels first if you're doing multiple trips.
Right.
But we made it so we planned it before going that we were only going to 1-shot every partage. And thank God we did that, because our first partage was 11 kilometers. Wow. And that would have been tough to go back and forth to get some other stuff. So it was good. It worked out. It worked out a lot. That's good. Yeah.
Wow. And you were saying that it was 52 days, but you could have done it in like 30 days.
Yeah.
So you really took your time. And, how many hours of paddling were you doing a day?
Yeah. So we were probably on average, I'd say 6 to 7 hours of paddling a day. And then in there, there's a lot of partages. So in the total, the whole trip, we did a little over 100 partages. The last 2 weeks of the trip, however, we only had 10 partages, because at the last 2 weeks we were then in the lake when we went to Lake of the Woods, and then we hopped over those little dam in Lake of the Woods to the Winnipeg River system. And in the Winnipeg River system, the only partages that exist are pretty much hydroelectric dams and a few other little things. So the last 2 weeks we only had 10 partages, but the first 5 weeks we could have had maybe on average 4 to 5 partages a day. Like sometimes you had 10 partages a day, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, right? So because of that, our paddling days are a lot shorter, and we're taking more time to do partages. So on average, we were paddling at the beginning 25 kilometers a day. which isn't a lot. And in fact, before leaving, we had budgeted that just to make sure we can make the trip in 52 days. Because, you know, we've done canoeing before, like 2-3 day trips, but never 7 weeks.
Right.
And all these little 2 to 3 day trips we did prior to that, we knew that we could, just by talking to people, we can do the loop in the 2 to 3 days, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't really a question of distances.
Yeah.
However, for this, to plan that we could finish the trip in 52 days because we had certain commitments when we came back.
Right.
But also that we're on time for the resupplies because we didn't want to miss our food drops.
Right.
Because or else, because with the food drops, we had people coming to drop us food.
Yeah.
We know that talking to people before leaving during the planning stage, some people who did long trips, they were talking how what they like to do is they like to call either post offices or even reserves and ask them, hey, could you keep our food barrel until we pass by? So at that time, there's less of a time commitment to get somewhere at a certain date. So you can kind of show up and you know it's waiting for you.
Right.
But this, we had to meet people. So because of that, we really budgeted 25 kilometers a day about. And talking to a few canoers here before leaving, like Robert Stanners, for example, he was saying, 25 kilometers is nothing. You can easily crush 30 to 45 kilometers a day.
Yeah.
And at first we were thinking like, oh shit, man, that's a lot. Like, whew. And then we realized, yeah, it's true. When there's like in the Winnipeg River system, we were averaging 30, 40 kilometers a day just because there's no portages and you're just paddling. Like,
right.
You go pretty quick when you're paddling. It's really good. And when you can pull like 8-hour days isn't that bad, especially when you're sitting in a canoe and you get sore, right? But
yeah.
It's very doable. So.
And it's relaxing too, you know.
Oh, for sure.
You know, it's a whole vacation on itself.
Yeah, and that's like I said, we took our time. So 52 days, you could probably do it in 30 days. I mean, we would start paddling at 7, 8. We'd stop paddling at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then because in the Canadian Shield, all of a sudden there's these beaches everywhere. There's these beautiful beaches in the Canadian Shield,
right?
That you wouldn't think exist, and. Yeah, it was 3 o'clock. Like, yeah, let's stop at this beach. This beach is beautiful.
Right.
So we'd stop, put up our tents, and just lay on the beach, go swimming, and then slowly make supper. And so it was a physical vacation, but it was very much a fun vacation where we did feel like we were relaxing and having a good time.
But sometimes it's so satisfying to really, you know, be on your own and be self-sustaining, self-reliable, you know, doing your own thing. It is really satisfying, you know, to live that kind of lifestyle or, you know, just to do it as a vacation, really.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
It's so much fun. You know, sometimes there is a time and place for like, you know, going to the Cancun resort where everything's given to you. But then, you know, sometimes you that's not what you want. You want a challenge. You want to get out of the luxury of, you know, because, you know, even, you know, those weekend getaways, those are really good. Like, you know, even if you're going to do like a few days hike and you're staying outside, it's, you know, it roughens you up a little bit just as much as, you know, when you get back, it really makes you appreciate everything. And, you know, your bed is extra comfortable night when you get back. So, you know, it is a lot of fun, you know, though, keeping it changing and keeping it always new things going on. And I mean, that's the really nice thing about Canada is that there's no shortage of new lakes and new trails to go look at and adventure.
For sure.
There's countless, you know, cool things to do here. You know, a lot of places, you know, it's so small and it's so already developed that, you know, the trails of the national parks are very established. And you know, and Canada is one of those places where it's like, you know, even if there isn't a national park designated here, there could be, you know, nobody that lives here for like 100 kilometers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, there could be the most beautiful, you know, scenery and, you know, valley that you could ever see in like postcards, but no one really looks at it because there's no roads, there's no, you know, electricity there. So it's, you know, it's only kept for those who really want to go hiking and really want to go check those out, right?
Yeah, like there's a guy I was following on YouTube called Roger Barnes, and his thing, he does dinghy cruising in Europe. Okay. And him, I bought his book because I was interested in sailing. And I was reading his book, and he was saying how, for him, because he's cruising in Europe, when he's sailing on the oceans and on the seas, he feels like it's one of the only places for him that's very wild, right? That's 100% wild, because you look at Europe, right, and there's not a lot of wild terrain. They've developed so many things, right? They've ran canals through everywhere, and you compare that to Canada. It's true that the oceans and the seas is a very wild place, but we still have a lot of real wilderness compared to Europe, where you can walk for miles and miles and there's absolutely no one, which is fun. A little scary, right, in case you get lost, but it's you're absolutely right. It is actually true wilderness we have, which is just fun.
And it's like there you could go maybe a few kilometers without seeing civilization. Here you can go days without seeing a single lamppost or a single electricity line, and you're like, this is if something goes wrong here, it's a higher stakes.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure.
But did you guys have by chance those a kind of like satellite phone or like a GPS tracker kind of thing? Because I know through the Army cadets, that's what we would have. We would have like a GPS tracker, and like, if there was an emergency, we can always send message.
Yeah, so we did buy one. So it wasn't purely a spot GPS that could call in for help.
Sure.
What we bought was a Garmin InReach Mini is the one we bought. Basically,
that's even more expensive. It's really nice.
Yeah. It was quite expensive. Actually, we're looking to sell it just because we bought it as a group, and
I see.
We did enjoy some of the functions, but some of the functions we found were just not necessarily necessary. So we had bought this one specifically so that it was a spot GPS. So in case of an emergency, we could your cat we could call in to get a heli evac, in case something really really bad went wrong. But also what we could do is we had I think 3 or 4 preset messages that we could send to our friends and family, who also had the link we sent them, and we could drop pins of our campsites. So one of the routines is Joey, he was in charge of the Garmin InReach Mini, and whenever we'd get to a campsite, he would drop a pin with the next campsite number, and then would send a message, everything is all right, or everything is okay, kind of thing. Or that was the only preset messages we had, because we figured if something's gonna go wrong, we're not gonna text our parents something's wrong. We're just gonna call the emergency right away, and then once we get to a safety, then we're gonna tell them. But anyways, we found personally that function, although it was somewhat reassuring for our family, wasn't necessarily necessary, and a normal just spot GPS would have been fine. So that's why personally we're thinking of selling it. Also because it was $500, and then you have to buy a subscription service, of course, just to send your messages and shit. So it's like screw that. Like honestly, like if I were doing this again, I just want like a spot GPS where all it does is I can call for emergencies. That's its only function.
And that's you can get that for like $150.
Yes,
instead of 600.
A lot less expensive. So now we're selling it. So if anybody's watching this, I can look at the camera. If anybody's is watching this show and is looking for an Garmin InReach Mini, we got one to sell.
But you said it had a lot of functionality to it too.
Oh yeah, it had a lot of functionality, but it's just functionality that we didn't
end up using
necessarily. We used it, but we just didn't find it. To me, I didn't find it necessary. Because also to me, what I enjoyed about this trip is that my phone only worked when I was in Atacocan in the resupply.
You like the disconnectedness.
I love the disconnectedness.
So you don't want a satellite phone.
I mean, like a satellite phone is not a bad idea, so you can call. But I mean, you're not going to be using the satellite phone to chit chat.
Text,
So like I really liked the disconnectedness and the fact that I was living in the wilderness. But what I didn't like though is how my family, some members of my family got obsessed by looking at the map. Because they were worried about me, or maybe they also just wanted to be there with us too. To me, maybe it stopped them from living in the moment too at home, while we were living in our moment in the bush. So that's why, for me, I wouldn't want to have that same functionality. Just to like every 2 weeks, like, hey, we're still okay. Don't worry about us.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
I guess do you have any new trips you're planning for next summer? In a longer portage trip, or what do you think?
Well, I think the same group of us were thinking. I mean, not all the members. Well, depending on where we all are. Like a couple of these, I know Jesse and Joey Jesse and Jess, they're going out to BC. Joey, he might be going out to BC. And then now it's just me and Aubry staying at home. But we'd like to, the two other canoe trips I'd like to do for sure is leaving from the Forks and going all the way to York Factory.
Where's that?
So York Factory is on the Hudson's Bay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that'd be going the length of Lake Winnipeg, then go all the way up north to the Hudson's Bay. So that'd be a fun trip. The other trip I'd like to do is, I think, starting at the base of the Rockies and taking, I think it's this series of rivers where I think you think the Saskatchewan, I forget if it's the North Saskatchewan or the South Saskatchewan. You link up to the Assiniboine River and you take the Assiniboine all the way back home to Winnipeg. So
right.
Those are the two other trips I'd like to do.
That would be very
Not doing that next summer.
Right.
Or maybe in 2-3 years. But I don't want to go do a lot of sailing these days. So
right.
Next summer I'll hopefully be sailing somewhere. But if not, they'll be canoeing. So
well, that's basically what happened to me. We were hopefully going to do some trips this summer, but that got pushed back. So we ended up doing just a little local trip here into Saskatchewan. Bless you.
Thank you.
So we just went to Saskatchewan. We went to the Badlands National Park. So that was a lot of fun.
Badlands is a lot of fun.
I really enjoyed it. Lots
Who'd
of
you go
prairie
with?
dog. I went with Nick, Valentin, and Florent. So
nice.
Yeah, so it was a nice little crew of 4 of us, and we ended up taking 2 cars because we had so much stuff.
For sure, yeah.
And we were there for like 7 or 8 days. So it was a nice reset. It was definitely the right place to go because it was so empty. There was maybe 10 other campers. That were there, and that's based 10 other groups, and that was it. And so it was very isolated and very good place to be in August. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot of fun because as much as it's not Banff or it's not like a crazy touristy destination as much, it was really nice to just be somewhere where you can just sit there with the scenery and you can read a book or do whatever you really want to do. And that's what we ended up doing. We were at the campsite. Valentin was doing a lot of painting. We were playing chess. We were doing all sorts of stuff.
For sure,
just enjoying the moment. And we could go do some hiking and just do some stuff because we were so close to the American border. It's actually really cool that the campsite we were at, the west block of the campsite, is literally 5-minute walk from the American border, and which is a weird place for a campsite, a campground for the national park. But once we did the hike, and then we get to these wooden posts with barbed wire, a really 200-year-old fence, and we're like, what is this fence? And it wasn't just a fence. It was just the reminiscence of a fence that wasn't you could just walk across
for sure.
And then we were walking down there and we were seeing all the Badlands, and you can see all the canyons, and you're like, oh, this is really cool. And then in the far distance you see a big SUV truck with people with binoculars, and I'm like, oh, do you think that's the border services? And I was like, probably, yeah. And so we were like, oh wow, we could see the border services people here. They're making sure no Canadians are crossing the border. I'm like, don't worry, nobody wants to go to the States right now. So
for sure,
if anything, they're coming up here. So, which is unbelievable. There's been over even with the closed borders, there's been over 2 million people coming in the borders this year. So, that kind of, it's the idea of, we have globalism, and the idea of having an isolated quarantine is next to impossible now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, that's
in the global world. Yeah, absolutely.
They say they close the borders, yet there's always exceptions to the rules, right? There's always, we're essential service, or we're going to Alaska through Canada, or we're visiting dying family.
It's such a big border,
it's the world's biggest border
for sure.
So it's next to impossible to, unless you would go the Trump way, but even then it wouldn't. It's such a large land border. It's almost unfeasible to think about putting a
absolutely.
border. You know, the Great Wall of China
Controlling
was
it, you know?
something, but I mean, you know,
Yeah.
there's no, and Canada and America's relationship is so interconnected. There's not really a point to having a border. Like, we share military airspace. We're in NATO. We're in NORAD. Like, it's we're so interconnected. There's not,
Yeah.
and people seem to forget that, you know, immigrants, if people come here illegally, they don't have a SIN number, so they can't really get a job.
No, yeah, yeah.
So what are they going to do here? They're going to, you know, the only thing they could do is work, you know, under the table jobs, like construction jobs or something like that. So it's like, well, you know, they're not really taking any social services if they're not in the system. So, you know, it's like, it's at their disadvantage to not come in properly. They're losing out at the end if they're not, you know, doing the paperwork, and then they become a citizen, they get the SIN, they get all the pension plan, you know, which, you know, it only makes sense, right? You know, it's incentivized to be, you know, to want to do it the proper way.
Right. And like, in one way you could say, yeah, they're losing out because they don't have the social services. But I mean, they can be winning if they're running away from a bad problem. You know, like, if they're a marginalized group,
right.
Listen,
and it's tough.
They might be winning out even if they don't have the social services when they get here. Right?
That's true. They're just happy to be alive.
For
sure.
Sure.
We got out of a tyranny, you know, the Middle East or whatever. So it makes a lot of sense, you know, that. But even then, you know, we have a lot of, you know, refugee status, and we do kind of have that kind of help that, you know, it was amazing that, you know, when the athletes that came to Winnipeg for the Pan Am Games in 1999, the Cuban team, there were some of the athletes that when they got here, they declared refugee status because they did not want to go back to Cuba.
Oh, for sure. I can imagine, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they gave them the asylum they seek because, you know, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, you don't want to go back into that, you know, poverty lifestyle, and you know, you don't want to live under the boot of a government. You know, it's not fun. So, you know, and it's amazing how many people, you know, risk their lives and lose their lives just to go to, like, you know, Miami or to get to Florida. So
for sure,
you know, it's kind of, you know, it shows you the politics really matters, you know, when we don't address those kind of issues, it can just fall apart really easily.
For sure.
So, I mean, you know, now America's slowly getting better. They got rid of the embargo, so now there's slowly the relationship between the United States and Cuba is starting to get better. Now there's like there's travel that's allowed now and stuff like that. So but it's still not 100% perfect policy. It's still in the transition period, right? They still have Guantanamo, you know, all that stuff. So, I mean, it's really tough for them, you know, for Cuba and for like the asylum seekers to, you know, get the need they want a lot of the time. I mean, you know, as much as we want to save the world, you know, if there's chaos in the world and everybody needs our help, I mean, we can't, you know, if there's 10 fires, the firefighters can only go to one fire at a time and start, you know, taking out fire one at a time if there's not that many, if we don't have enough resources, right? So it's a tough situation, especially Canada, unlike the States, unlike a lot of other countries. We're a big landmass, but we're a small population, which means it's, you know, money, you know, our GDP isn't as high. Our GDP is about the same as all of California, so one American state. Sure. So it's kind of, you know, we can't be expected to save the world overnight, you know, with the amount of resources that's at our disposal. As much as we're goodwilled and, you know, we want to do that kind of stuff, it's, you know, it has to be a communal effort, and it has to be, you know, instead of putting politicians, a lot of the time they like to put Band-Aid solutions because obviously it's for re-election purposes. They look at the short-term gains and not the long-term, you know, really of the fixing of the situation or the problems. They just kind of want to do small token gestures so that they can just get a pat on the back and, you know, they can be left alone about the issue for the next 10 years.
Right, yeah.
Which is unfortunate, but, you know.
That is what it is.
It is what it is. I mean, and maybe that's a symptom of our democratic process and our democracy, where that's the kind of, you know, we talk about populism. that's kind of what like a democracy is, you know, the loudest mouth that blabs and that gets the support gets the majority vote, and then
Yeah.
they get their way, which sometimes is good, but sometimes mob rule ends up being a really bad thing.
Oh, for sure.
And you know,
For sure.
it's only after the fact
There's a prime
once
example
you
south.
burn the witches, and then you're like, well, maybe they were just studying medicine and you just didn't know, and you didn't
No, for
like
sure.
women studying medicine or something.
Yeah.
So it's like mob rule sometimes has to be really, you know, discussed or maybe criticized, and thinking there has to be a better way of doing politics. There has to be a better way of, you know, having an accountable system, or having, you know, a governing
for
system
sure.
that keeps liberties in check, but also has the protection. Because I mean, what was the point of government to begin with? Was to protect the livestock, protect the agriculture, and put a wall around the city, right? This is the like the prehistoric beginning of government, right? They were the protectors of the city. So at the same time, that's their job, and the politicians have lost what the mandate of their job is. It seems to be more of a pandering thing instead of it being a protection thing. Because I mean, let's be real, we don't live in a feudal age anymore, so
No.
protection is a lot less. You know, cities don't really need walls. I mean,
No.
there's not going to be a cavalry coming in. Like it's
No. Yeah.
so. But that's the thing. The warfare has become economic, or you know, sanctions on countries and doing stuff like
Yeah.
that. That's become the new world standard of doing. You know, it's like, well, we don't like your policy, so we're going to put economic sanctions, or we're going to ask our nations to boycott your
Yeah.
markets, or do all sorts of things like that, right? I mean, they try it on Russia, they try it on North Korea, and I mean, it's really difficult when some people don't follow those embargoes, or they don't follow those kind of international policy, which I mean, you know, it's such a complicated issue that it's very difficult to, you know, before it was the American empire that basically controlled the world stage. And then, you know, you went into the Cold War, and then now we're in, you know, a the American empire is becoming more and more questioned, you know, they're,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
and, you know, even though they still have the military supremacy around the world, you know, all the military bases, everything they have is, you know, astonishing. And but at the same time, it seems that, you know, without the economic backing, all that big military complex that they have can very easily, you know, be disbanded. Everybody's fired. There's no more money in the you know coffin, so everybody's fired. So I mean, it really comes down to, you know, the most critical issue for a government or for a state nation is, you know, to make sure its pocketbook isn't drained completely, and he still has, you know, a war chest to work with, right? You know, that's how elections work, that's how governments work, right? It seems that, you know, now it's not how many men at arms do you have, it's how many gold coins do you have. And, you know, for the most part, that's probably for the best, because there's a lot less bloodshed now. So
No, for sure. Yeah.
it's a lot better. We're a lot better off. You know, there's no arguing for feudal systems, right?
No, yeah, there's not necessarily an argument for feudal systems, but I think you could. Now I don't have the solution at all, but if to re-envision the government, right, to re-envision how things are ruled and how things are decided, you get, like, I think there's so many, like you said, it's a very big complex problem, right? To try to fight them all at once, it's kind of impossible, right? And you'd have to, you know, you'd almost have to find a brand new system, a different system that could potentially work. Either whatever that system is, but it's a really hard issue. You can't attack everything at once. It's impossible, right? It's
really funny to see Barack Obama give an interview after he's president, and now saying, you know, the presidency, you know, and its offices and how the government's currently set up. It's set up so that there's a lot of filibustering, a lot of, well, if you're, you know, we're on a different side of the political aisle, so we're going to stop whatever policy you want to bring in until we get a majority in the House, or until our people are in. and then we'll try to get things through. But then the opposite party does filibustering themselves.
Gotcha.
And they go back and forth. So what ends up happening is, yeah, exactly. Presidents propose something, and it ends up not passing because the House, just out of vindictiveness, because they don't want to give the other party the win, or they give them, sometimes that's what they'll do. They'll take the exact same idea and repackage it as theirs once they're in office, just so that they can get the political clout or get, that, reputation of, we're for the people, or we're showing the interest, instead of saying, no, let's all come together. You propose the bill, we support it. Let's all work together. Because people don't remember the opposition leader that supported the motion. It's always, it was his motion, so he gets all the feathers in his cap.
I really don't know anything about American politics or politics in general, to be honest.
Sure.
I think maybe one of the results, one of the causes for that to happen is the fact that the States only has two main parties. Like you look in Canada,
it makes it a little bit more different.
Yeah, we have the NDP, which I'd still call them a main party, even though they've never had a prime minister in the recent years.
They've had premiers provincially.
Provincially,
so
yeah.
They
provincially have the support.
They've gained a lot of reputation, and they've gained some kind of that kind of respect that they can be.
For sure.
They can form government, right?
But the fun thing about if you have like a minority government in Canada, right?
Yeah.
You need to win over
balance of power.
Yeah, you need to win over the third party. So it's not just two heads who've historically been butting heads forever.
Right.
And now they're still butting heads.
Right.
Like it's so fun. Like I watched Borat 2 last night.
Right.
And they're doing the interview with a guy and he's like, what do you think is more dangerous? The virus or the Democrats? And they're like, oh, the Democrats. It's just like the Democrats and the Republicans themselves, they absolutely hate each other. It doesn't make any sense.
And when you do that, you reinforce that kind of violent behavior.
Oh, for sure. How can you pass anything if you only have two parties and each party hates the other party? You need a third party.
And for them, they're fighting the good fight, and it's
becoming. Oh, for sure, they're always fighting their own good fight. Of course,
it's really kind of sad when you see it that way, and it's like everybody's on their hill and they're like very extreme about I'm gonna die on this hill, and everybody can.
It's ridiculous. I think, like I said, not knowing a lot about American politics.
Yeah,
I think they need another party, just to shift the balance of power.
Right.
To force people to actually work together instead of butting heads all the time.
And, I think that's Canada has like obviously a more democratic system that way. But at the same time, there's a lot of institutions like how the Supreme Courts are chosen. The judges are appointed, not elected.
For sure.
Same thing with senators. They're appointed, not elected.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that does have a place and a value, because there's nothing worse than having a politically motivated judge, just like in America, where he runs as a Democrat or a Republican, and then they're basically at the whims of one political ideology, instead of saying context, especially if you're a judge of the law. Basically, your job is to give context to the law and say, given the situation, this is my verdict.
Yeah.
Instead,
and looking at precedents.
Let me look at my political playbook instead, right? And
absolutely.
It's kind of gross. And to me, it seems that that's like, open corruption, or it seems that it's not a good way of having a democratic system where, you give one person the crown for a few years, and they're the benevolent dictator that the judge that decides the fate of families and of people, based on a political decision and based on getting elected. And it's kind of a weird thing, right? And some states still have elected sheriff's office and stuff like that. And it's like, well, what if the guy's not like qualified? And it's like, well, we won't vote for him. It's like, yeah, well, what if no one else runs and he's the only guy?
Yeah.
Then, you're going to have some random guy that's going to be the sheriff, and he's going to have like authority in your town. So, it's kind of like old systems have to change. And, it seems like times haven't changed with politics hasn't changed with the times, right? Like the Kanye West podcast with Joe Rogan, I was watching it earlier.
Okay.
And he's like quite the guy, and there's a lot of cool things he talks about, and he calls himself a visionary, and I kind of believe it. I believe that the way he thinks, the way he projects himself, seems to me that he the way he thinks is quite genuine and very like sympathetic. He's really trying to understand the universe, and he's really trying to do something good for it.
Right.
And he got into Christianity, and good for him. So everybody can have their own beliefs and
For
have
sure,
their own thing. But at the same time, I really liked the things he talked about, how society changes every 20 years, and we still have constitutions that are, in Canada's case, 100 years old, and in America's case, 400 years old. Like, and without any changes, without any amendments, we change the criminal code, every, month there's a new law that passes that changes the criminal code in some way. Yet the Constitution itself hasn't been changed in quite a long time. In Canada, it was in the 70s with Pierre Trudeau, but, or in the 80s, sorry. But realistically, we kind of have to amend and change those kinds of documents, those governing documents that tell us what we are, who we are, what we're doing, and where should we go in 100 years from now, and not just think 2 years or 5 years in the future, but thinking next generations, or thinking multiple generations in the future. And I think that's kind of like the way of the future, right? We're breaking barriers, and we're the deconstructing parts of reality where governance can be optimized. And now even we're thinking the next big debates are going to be, should we let AI just be the government? Should we just let AI, computers and cameras already take the photos of your car when you're speeding in an intersection, right? And what's the next step of that? They're just going to optimize the entire process. And there's some governments in Scandinavia, I saw that they have a really cool centralized government website, so that you have one account with the government, your citizen account, and then it has access to your health services. It would be Service Canada.
Dominic,
it would be all sorts of like.
Are you telling me like you're talking about federal websites that actually make sense?
Right, a federal website that would actually
would work and would look good and would be useful.
And the really coolest thing they were talking about.
Why does Canada have the worst websites? Like, no, honestly, you can't find anything.
Because we're the second banana to America. So whenever we call Google or any software developer, they're like, Canada? Okay, yeah, let me get you the thing that America rejected and give you that. Because that's what you can afford. You can't afford anything else.
None of our federal, like, in Europe, they have, my brother's wife's sisters.
They already started voting online.
For sure, yeah. Like,
they're already doing that.
They have beautiful
referendums,
websites. For sure. That makes sense, where it's easy to use, and you can do what you would need to do as a citizen.
We already do our banking online.
Yeah. Why can't the federal government just like wake up and make an actual website that works? Like, that's ridiculous. Sorry, keep on going.
The best part, well, no, you're right. And the best part about this website that I found ingenious was it was centralized, as it's all like put together, all the government ministries and all the services put in one place. But at the same time, it's decentralized in its systems. So they were saying that if there was ever a coup, or if anybody would try to invade politically and it would take the Capitol buildings, the technically the website would be decentralized, and even if they would break all the servers at those buildings, the website would still be up on the other servers everywhere else. So they were saying that it's literally impossible to shut down the government, right? And so it's like, this is like next level security. This is the future of guaranteeing our safety and guaranteeing the sovereignty of a nation or of a people, right? And giving them the autonomy to decide its laws, decide its government, decide its ways of living. And I'm all for that kind of regionality. I think the whole point of having a centralized global entity doesn't work, because top down, just like Brussels top down of Europe, doesn't work, right? People still need to have a sense of control over their homestead, right? And it's the only way for people to actually care about where they live, or care about their community. Because if you don't have a connection to it, if you don't have a stake in the game, you're not gonna really care. You're gonna say, if it gets bad here, I'm just gonna move somewhere else. And that's kind of a really sad attitude to have. You want to kind of have this idea where, no, this is my home, this is where I was raised, this is where my kids are going to be raised, and I have an investment in it. I have an interest in its production, and it's getting better, you know?
Yeah.
And
if you go purely centralized, also, you can't necessarily factor in everybody's own problems, right? Like,
exactly.
because the world is so huge, and there's so many cultures in the world, and the reason there's so many cultures is because people have to live differently in different places of the earth, right?
Right.
So you can't have a purely centralized system, or else it wouldn't factor in the different environments.
And
like, we have different needs compared to someone
Right.
who lives further south. Like, for example, my father, right? He went to Jamaica, and he was amazed how all their walls were super thin, and he's like, man, they're gonna freeze in wintertime. Right. Then he realized, oh man, I'm in Jamaica. They don't have winter.
Don't have winters, right?
Compared to us, right? We freeze outside. We physically die if we don't have a warm house. Which is why,
if you're homeless, it's better to be a criminal than to be homeless, because as a criminal, they give you housing, they feed you, they give you hot showers. So realistically, if you're out in the winter and you got nothing, just go steal a loaf of bread and or call the cops. What? Yeah. And this is a reality that
No, yeah. Unfortunately, yes, it does happen. Or people who are homeless, they move either out west or they move further south.
Right.
There is some.
And then there's the whole recidivism thing, right? It's like once they're in there, they feel that mentality where it's like, where am I going to go now? This is my home. Yeah. So they go back, which is really unfortunate. Well,
for sure.
That's the kind of mentality of institutionalized prisons. Maybe we have to rethink the idea of incarceration, or rethink the idea.
Sure.
Obviously we need to protect the public from people who pose a threat. Obviously that's why we have prisons. But at the same time, there has to be some kind of rehabilitation or some kind of effort to really make it so that they're able to reintegrate into society if possible. Some things are inexcusable, and they we shouldn't. But a lot of the time, I think most people who are incarcerated are not evil people, are not people that are beyond redemption.
For sure,
these are people that are down. And I love the movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas. It's an old movie from the 80s or 90s, but man, is it ever the coolest movie. It's about this guy that was a scientist for the American government. He would build the rockets, and he was building the rockets that would hold ballistic nuclear missiles on.
Gotcha.
And then basically, being in the 80s and 90s, computers came around. They became a lot better, so they took his job, right? So he got fired because computers optimized his job. Unfortunately, they don't need as many scientists anymore.
Yeah.
And so, he was told his entire life that, you follow the rules, you'll be rewarded. You follow the rules and you do everything by the book, and you'll be a shining example of society. And then he follows all the rules. He went to school, he did all this, and, society just spits him out, and, no more pension for him. He's just at the bottom. And, his, and the whole movie is him trying to get to his daughter's birthday party. And he's having a lot of trouble getting there. He gets confronted on the bus. People try to mug him, or the whole thing, right? And he's had enough. He's hit a moment where he's like, no, I'm not following society's rules anymore. It got me nothing. Look where I am. They guaranteed me all these things, but it never came to fruition. And I did everything they told me to. I followed every rule, and I still lost. And to him, that was like the moment where he snapped. And then he's going to McDonald's. He's like, I want an Egg McMuffin. And I'm like, it's 11:30, sir. We stopped serving breakfast a half hour ago. He's like, they're in the back. You're going to get me an Egg McMuffin, okay? I'm an American. You're going to give me my Egg McMuffin. And then it's just, the movie goes on for that kind of vibe for the entire thing, right? He sees a construction site, and he's like, these people, there's nothing wrong with the road. They're extorting money from the city so that they can inflate their prices.
Yeah.
And the construction guys are like, yeah, what about it?
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then he's like, God damn, this society, it's all a lie. It's all a lie. Everybody's corrupt. And then at the end of the movie, there's like the showdown. Spoiler alert. I mean, it's a movie from the 90s. You have no excuses for giving spoilers. And then they have the showdown of the cop, and they're like, you got to put yourself in. And he's like, wait, I'm the bad guy. People try to rob me. People try to, like, you know, everything crumbled apart and he's the bad guy. And, you know, it's kind of like that kind of thing where people are one, you know, speeding ticket away sometimes from their entire life being destroyed. You know, here's a $400 ticket that you can't afford, and now you can't pay your rent. And it just, it crumbles from there, man. It can be as easy as one ticket away from ruining your life.
Yeah, for sure.
And, you know, most people, you know, in my economic bracket, we can afford a few tickets and not, you know, you say whatever, you know, you move on. Some people, they don't have the luxury of, they don't have that $500. They don't have, you know, and that can be really the big difference, you know. And human beings, we need to take people into account more as, you know, we need to form relationships with people, and relationships, you know, are a greater currency than wealth. You know, relationships is, you know, just like Kanye West said, is if you have a relationship with your contractor that's building your house, he's going to build your house faster.
Right. Yeah.
Why? Because he cares.
Yeah, for sure.
Because he's going to actually have a vested interest in it. And so when you make people care, it seems that it makes the society work a lot better, instead of it being theocracy where everybody's just, you know, paper pushing bureaucratic jobs, where it's all compartmentalized. That's kind of the opposite of having having relationships and forming bonds and actually making an organic organization.
Right. Yeah,
What's the point of an organization is to be organic and to follow kind of like the relationships of nature. You know, what do? We communicate with each other, and we set expectations with each other, or habits, right? And I mean, you know, what else can we really do? It seems that with the technology we have now, with, you know, audio, visual communications, recording, the internet, media, it's almost impossible to argue against that. You know, this is the way forward, where our education system is going to be, you know, completely revitalized, completely rethought, where, you know, before everything was in a classroom with a desk and one teacher. Now we're thinking, you know, your education should be, you learn from biology and nature with David Attenborough, and you're watching all sorts of nature documentaries. Next thing, you're learning physics and math from Einstein's, you know, lecture series. You know, instead of it being, you know, one teacher, one boring classroom, it should be, you know, a mix of all the experts and all the great minds of humanity, where we all learn from them, right? Just like, you know, a Plato would learn from his you know, teachers, would be a worldly education instead of it just being.
Well, I mean, like, the modern technology makes it so that can happen now, right? Because you go 50 years ago, you couldn't necessarily get a lecture of, well, for example, the this is not a paid programming, but the masterclass series.
Right.
Like, I have a buddy who decided to subscribe to it, and he said it's fantastic, and you get, because of technology now, you get to have the best minds in the world making these master classes.
And there's also Skillshare too. That's
Skillshare, and people now have more and more access to this information, right? Compared to, you know, the further you go down in history, right, the less you have access to information.
Information was
information
hierarchical,
right? Information other than the information that you know around you, right? If you go back, I don't know. We'll pretend we'll go back 1,000 years, right?
Right.
You can still be a very good mason. You have all the information to be a fantastic mason in your village, right? And you're very a smart mason, but you wouldn't have access to the information halfway across the world of a different experience.
The only way would be
thinking.
A handwritten manuscript.
Yeah, for sure.
One book given to one person, right?
That'd
be the only way you would get that information.
Yeah, now, like, books, like, you can have thousands and thousands of copies online. You just have to press, you know, Control-C, Control-V. Now you have another copy of a book, and you can send that via email to someone else, you know?
Right.
So the information, the way we can spread information makes it so that we can have these lectures, like you say, about all these geniuses,
right,
sharing their information.
And, you know, even to the point where not even just experts now, you know, even on YouTube, whatever, it's the second biggest search engine in the world now. So
for sure,
whenever somebody is like, I want to learn how to do a Rubik's Cube, I learn the harmonica, they go to YouTube.
Oh, for sure.
And then you learn from the guy that's an expert in harmonica, and he teaches you, right?
Yeah.
So this entire idea of, and I think that's like the democratization of information to the next level, where there's no more, well, now the censorship is at the corporate level, right? At the company level of, you know, all those platforms. And, it's kind of, we'll have to see what kind of future there is, because some platforms, their selling point is we do end-to-end encryption, we don't censor, we're not a publication, we, you can do whatever you want, even if it's inappropriate. A lot of time on Twitter, there's like a lot of like, it seems that Twitter has like, it allows like, pornography, but it won't accept certain political opinions and agendas. So it's really like they censor political ideas, but other things, they don't seem to matter all that much, and they don't censor. So it seems it's really tough to decide, what platforms are public spaces, what of them are publishing houses, because basically that's what it's become, where Facebook and those social media, they curate what you see and how you see it, when you see it, and it's all about keeping your eyes and keeping your engagement. So realistically, it seems that they're a publishing house and not just a platform for people to share their opinions, because they select people's opinions and they select people's posts, and then they make your feed, right? So in that case, it's no longer you and your friends in your circle, it's just a curated message for you, just like a newspaper is, a bunch of articles that they've written and selected for your engagement. So, that's kind of like the way where, newspaper died, it's dying. Now, maybe that's the next future, is new, like minds.com is a kind of a new social media platform where, they're really, they emphasize the fact that they don't censor and they don't take anything off unless it's like legit hate speech, and you're like, you want to overthrow a government, then that's literally illegal. Obviously there's a line, but for the most part, free speech is, no matter, I can say things that make you uncomfortable, and you can't, just strangle me because I said things that make you uncomfortable. And I think that's fair. I think, that's the only way we can really move forward, is if we have critical discussions that people are offended by, or people take, it makes them rethink or reevaluate themselves and think, why did I always think that way? Why did I always have that stereotype in my head? Or why, and I think that's a good place to be, because if you're not constantly criticizing and you're not constantly reevaluating your own ideas, then you're really going to fall into, dogmatic ideologies, or you're going to fall into those traps, those philosophical traps that are, so prevalent in politics or intellectual discussion, or, in school and university. It's, it's, I think it's going to get better because of technology. So, there's a lot of, white noise, there's a lot of garbage in the way, but that's, just like anything else. There's a lot of terrible art before there's really beautiful art, right? People have to learn, people have to get better. And, I think this is the thing with social media, is unlike before, where you would learn from people's experiences and what not to do, and then you would not do it. Well, now your learning process is made public, and you get to be publicly humiliated for your learning, for your instead of it being in person in small groups, where if you say something really stupid, we can still be friends and nothing changes. But if you go on Facebook and you say something really stupid, that, you get ostracized from the group.
For sure, yeah.
And once you ostracize people, then that leads into extreme ideologies and alienation, where then that leads to resentment, and people feel left out by being bullied in high school, let alone, being ostracized for a real, reason that's kind of fair, right? So people are really fragile. People are really, they care so much, and we're such a social species that to exile somebody is almost inhumane to do. To say that because of your political beliefs, or because you have a differing opinion on religion or human rights or whatever it could be, realistically, unless you're advocating for like a torture or some kind of human rights violation, then I don't really see an issue why we can't keep talking, and why we can't, form a community. Because at the end of the day,
the only way you can get somewhere, right?
How can I learn if you're not going to willing to help me learn, right? How can we teach each other if we're not willing to have an engaged conversation, right?
For sure.
It's becoming just, harder and harder.
Yeah, like my dad always says often, it's just a lack of love,
Right.
If someone doesn't feel loved, right, they'll feel very much apart, and it'll lead to people thinking different crazy things, right?
Right. And that kind of, when you're lacking that love, then you feel like you need to, because you're having sadness, you project sadness, or you feel hate, so you project that hate.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's kind of the thing, is whenever the biggest thing what I've done is whenever somebody kind of goes that way, I always go the love route with them, and it completely screws with them.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
You're like, why are you doing this, man?
Yeah.
Like, what? This isn't you. Like, why are you getting mad? Why are you attacking me personally? What's the deal? And then they go like, oh, whoa, like they like completely change.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Because they realize that that's not really them. It's like they went on an impulsive urge, and that now they know that was like the wrong thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, this is like relationship building in a nutshell. I mean, and the best part is I kind of feel like this is what world leaders should do, is they should do like summit retreats where it's like hiking and canoeing and like cutting a rabbit and like putting over the fire, just so like we rehumanize people to being like, this is what community is about, this is what we're about, we cook and we go around the fire, and this is what humans do.
For sure.
And when we do that, we kind of see who we are as people, and we shed those kind of barriers with other people, and we say, oh, these are different people with different cultures, we have to stay separated. But then you go in the woods, and then you're like putting a freaking shrimp over the barbecue with each other in the woods. It brings you together, it gives you that kind of connection with each other. And I think that's kind of like something world leaders are lacking. Maybe that would be cool if they did a lot more, those kinds of retreats where they would, some people even argue that world leaders should do psychedelics, or like we should put them in under, DMT, and make them see the machine elves so that they can, care about the environment, as they're killing the earth, and, but that would be the ultimate responsibility put on their shoulders of saying, you're killing the earth. You need to do something. And then, instead of that message being told to just you and me, it would be told to the world leaders. And, that'd be quite a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. So,
for sure. Yeah.
I mean, they would, but I think that
wouldn't be a bad thing, but
that anxiety of having that responsibility would be a good thing for those leaders. Because I mean, realistically, that's their job. At the end of the day, I love when they give speeches that we're working night and day. We will not rest until a vaccine is found, or until this and that. Meanwhile,
no, for sure.
Oh, it's 5. All right, everybody, have a nice night. Okay, all right. The whole not my job, not my problem attitude. Even in government, right? Even in any institution, realistically, unless somebody's. It's not the norm that a person is so passionate that, they work through the night every night, and they're trying to go above and beyond and do every single detail to the letter, and not just be those, not my job, it's 5 p.m. All right, let's go. Let's get out of here. I hate this place, that kind of attitude. Yeah. And, as much as we want that kind of thing, it's...
Well, then, like, if you go back to what you were talking about earlier, like, there's a lot of... The whole society we live in, right? Where like we got to a point where everybody has a job, right? And to make things work, there's a bunch of little shit jobs that no one wants to do. If you're gonna remake a system, you have to make a system where, like, people do feel very much invested in their work, right?
Right.
And that could be, that could be people, instead of everything we buy everything that's manufactured somewhere else. Everybody starts maybe spending a bit more money and buying stuff made in the home,
supporting our neighbors, right?
Supporting neighbors, because I bet you the person who works a 9-to-5 job, hates being at a desk. Right. Maybe they secretly want to become a shoemaker. I don't know. That's just
working with your hands is a lot more satisfying.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. like obviously I'm not saying everybody who works in an office wants to become a shoemaker secretly, but something more artisanal where they actually see their work and
it's more satisfying.
Yeah, they're all more invested.
Right.
But then you need a very big shift and people stop getting Amazon Prime, which,
well,
if you don't get Amazon Prime, you can't watch Borat 2, so it's kind of tough.
Right.
Again, not a plug for Amazon.
It's such a complicated issue, and you're totally right. And it's kind of, people need to be, I like to support local, and I like to, it's really a question of, do you like the quality of the good? Because realistically, if I'm paying for quality goods that are manufactured here in Canada, and I know that somebody put effort, then, let's take this gourd, for example. This gourd I bought in Peru.
Oh, yeah.
It takes one person about, they say it's about a week of labor to do one.
Oh, yeah.
I think maybe it's, maybe 2-3 days. But even then, if I was getting paid 2-3 days salary, I would expect to get paid $300 to $300.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Right? For them, they sell me this at $10.
Yeah,
even
absolutely,
less.
Yeah.
And so for me, and I'm like, well, how many hours did you put in this? 3 days worth of labor. It's like, here's 50 American. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, at least, you're trying to sell it to me for 10. Here's 5 times.
Right. Yeah.
Why? And they're like, why? It's like, because that's what I would want to get paid at least, like you're a human being. You're not an animal. Like, what am I going to do? Like, especially, it's kind of like, you should treat people how you want to be treated. And, that's why you tip people at the bar. Because if I'd be working that job, it would be very nice to get paid an extra, few bucks so that I can, pay for my, tuition or pay for rent or whatever. So it's like, and I think the whole thing with, somebody's got to clean the toilet. Somebody's got to do the jobs that nobody wants to do. And I think maybe that's part of society is restructuring a way where, we should all pay our societal dues. We should all have to go through those hard jobs, or, even trust fund kids should realistically learn the value of hard work and learn, when you're in your 20s, you should be working hard. You should be doing stuff that you're not completely happy with. Why? Because when you're in your 40s, you might actually have a little bit of wealth to do things that you do want. You'll be able to afford a cottage, to go on vacation, to do what you want to do in life. Yeah. But realistically, that should be part of life, and the part of the social contract is, you pay your societal dues, you learn the value of hard work, you learn, what it means to, you should clean the toilets, because it's not above you and it's not below you to clean toilets. And this is the whole thing with, business owners and a lot of people. It's they think they get to a point where it's like, oh, I'm above this kind of work, so it's for other people. Yet, my parents' gym, we don't have a dedicated custodian. So guess who cleans the toilets? Us.
Yeah, for sure.
It's part of life. If you own a business, you clean a washroom. So what? It takes 10 minutes. You get some chemicals and some towels, and you do it. Like it's you should just be a grown up and grow up, and you have to clean. Oh no, I have to vacuum. Oh no, I have to do laundry. Literally, people had to take their clothes to the river and had to hardcore do like. And you complain that you have a freaking machine that you dump it in, put a thing of soap, and close it and come back in an hour.
For sure.
How dare people be so freaking, like, not so disconnected from reality and be like, oh, I could be playing video games right now instead of doing these chores. It's like, the very least you can do is your chores.
Yeah, for sure.
Come on. Like, and if you live in Canada, you got a shovel on top of everything else. So we have even more to complain about.
For sure.
Hopefully, the freaking climate makes it so that there's less snow here, because that would be nice not to have to freaking.
Oh, man, I want my snow. I want my snow.
We can go to the little bunny hill and go do our snowboarding off of the ditch. Because that's the only place you can do snowboarding in Manitoba. Essentially, is the floodway, which is a big ditch we dug around Winnipeg, and it's the only place really that you can do skiing.
Well, unless you go to Riding, you can go to Riding Mountain. Yeah, Riding Mountain's not too bad.
That's like 3.5 hours though.
Yeah, a little bit
So
of a drive.
it's not like a day trip. It's a
No.
weekend
Yeah,
getaway.
you gotta go for the
right?
weekend.
Yeah,
You gotta go
yeah.
for the weekend. For sure.
I mean, you know, it's and you know, it's nice to have different seasons because it's kind of weird when you're in like Los Angeles and it's, you know, 27 degrees and the grass is green year round, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
It's kind of nice to have that cycle of reset.
Absolutely.
So, you know, everything kind of like stays in motion. Nothing ever stays in place, especially in the north or, you know, where it's hard to survive for animals.
For sure.
When I look outside, I'm like, how are these deers surviving the winters, man? When I see minus 40 and wind going hardcore, and I'm like, animals are living in there. Like, how do they freaking not die instantly from the cold? And they, you know, they find a way, you know, and it's really crazy. And the really unfortunate part about Canada's position is that since we're a Nordic country, we can't really move away from heating our homes and having heated vehicles to transport ourselves across the place because we're so...
You can't get away from that, you're right, but you can find different ways to do it.
Right. There's, you know, gas or geo... There's some kind
geothermal,
of geothermal and
there's
all sorts
solar
of
solar
ways.
thermal, like you can have solar heating which isn't necessarily a PV panel. So a PV panel would be a solar panel, right?
Right.
But then there's also solar thermal, which is instead of taking that heat and creating into electricity, you just harness the heat, you store the heat, then you...
Exactly.
There's tons of ways you can do it that isn't natural gas, for example.
Right. Well, you know, that's kind of the whole thing of decentralizing the, you know, the monopolies that control... And, you know, it's kind of funny because the hydro, the electricity, they're monopolized by the state, essentially. So realistically, there's no competition. It's realistically, you have to go to them to get your electricity. And, you know, it's kind of, you know, in America, a lot of places you need permits to put solar panels on your house. You know, they're trying to make it harder for people to be more self-sustaining. You know, a lot of places it's illegal to have a garden in your front property. In the even if you own the plot of land, you own it. It's yours. Yet they're saying, no, you have to put grass or you have to put rocks, but you can't put like carrots and vegetables. How dare you? How dare you try to be self-sustaining and not try to live off of the system? Because once you have your own food, you have your own electricity, you have your own water, then you're a lot less prone to taking orders from the mayor, or taking orders from the state system where they tell you this is how it's going to be and this is how you need to live now. You know? And you're like, well, not really. My life doesn't change because I have my own water, my own electricity, my own food. So my life doesn't really change. You know, the society can collapse. I will still have food, electricity, and water. And so realistically, I'm fine. A lot of the time, and so those people, they don't have to watch the news all the time. Why? Because it doesn't affect them. You know, if the power grid goes down, who cares? It doesn't affect them. They have their own thing, right? And that's kind of, I think, where the real power is power is having the true wealth. And true wealth is your own food source, your own power source, your own property. Not, I lease a car, I rent an apartment. These are all fake things. At the end of the day, you don't own those things. So if you get fired or if you get sent home because of COVID and no one can work anymore, well, what do you have to fall back on? Nothing, because you lived in a leased and rent society instead of saying, I want to own my property, I want to own my land, I want to own my food, and to actually have wealth that I can see.
Right.
And it's not easy, you know.
No,
homesteading
for sure,
is not easy, but it's
at all.
It goes back to people feel it's been proven that people feel a lot less depressed when they do homesteading or when they have their own, you know, food source and they got a chicken coop and they get their own food, because you feel more connected with the earth. You feel more in tune with what's going on around you, because, you know, there's a relationship between you and your animals, you and the environment. And, you know, it's kind of I think it's a much more fun existence. If I could really, you know, if I could invest in having that kind of lifestyle, I think
for sure
in the future, that's what I'm going to be putting my money to. The last thing I'm going to buy is a Bugatti. You know, that's the last thing I'm ever going to get. You know, before that, any of that, it will be a bit nice big property, and where the winters aren't that bad, so I can actually grow some gardening.
For
and
sure,
I can,
yeah.
I think it's a lot more, and I still want to be connected with society. I still want to be engaged and be a part of it, but I feel like I don't want to be under the control of everyone else. I don't want to be under the whims of the mob mentality. I don't want to be I want to have a safety net from that,
Right,
where
yeah,
it's
yeah.
my own safety net. And I think, human beings we're just driven to be like that, to be, having our own little tribes or having our own family, homesteads. It only makes sense, and the more we talk about it, the more, some of my friends, we talk, it's like, what's the ideal government? A hippie commune.
For sure.
Right? We just go live on Vancouver Island in a hippie commune.
Yeah.
We all just work together. It's going to be great. And, maybe, a few hundred people, it can work, because you have a human relationship with each other and you have expectations and habits. So it can work. But 35 million people that have different upbringings, cultures, and it's impossible.
For sure.
It's impossible. And, I think maybe that's why it's good to have regionality, is you have people get together, in their regions or in the communities. And I think that's the only feasible way to actually, we always talk about making the world a better place, but realistically, it starts with you and your community, because that's the only way you have an impact, is where you can start the domino effect in the right direction.
Right, yeah.
If the domino's going in the wrong direction, you're the domino that can stop it and push it in the other direction. We all have that power. Being alive and being, human beings with, opposable thumbs and the brains we have, we're those kind of, deterministic creatures, where we're the shepherds of the earth. We decide its fate. We decide how we want to go forward. So realistically, it's all up to us. We're the responsible ones. So we have to take that kind of responsibility, I think. Even though some people would consider that hubris, yet I would consider it inappropriate not to be proud or not to have a stake in the game where you want to be involved in what's going on.
For sure.
Because if not, then, you're just being selfish and just being, whatever kind of attitude, where it's not my problem, not my job, when realistically it's all our problem and it's all our job.
For sure.
I mean, that's kind of a lot of the new politics that's going on is those kinds of debates. It's very unorthodox. It's no longer like, red versus blue. It's more philosophical concepts and
right.
how what's the point of governance? What's the point of having these institutions and these hierarchies? For some reasons, it's really necessary and it does work. In other regards, sometimes it's just best that you leave it to, that's why Canada kind of has a good system. There's municipal, provincial, federal division of powers. It would be kind of terrible if there'd only be one federal level of government and all the decision would come from them. That'd be kind of unfortunate. And
for sure,
that would be, disingenuous. So I like the system where we have the levels of power. So, if I want to get really into education, I run for provincial office, right? I get into the provincial state. And, it only makes sense that we have those kinds of, regionalities and divisions that are, not necessarily completely factionalistic, but, just a way so that, kind of like regiments in the army, where we're all on the same team, but there's always the element of competitiveness and that, rivalry with, Winnipeg constantly rivaling with Calgary. Okay. Or, are we going to get more economic development? Oh, they got the Olympics. Oh,
right.
We have the Pan Am Games, right? It's like the rivalry that goes with it. And it's a good thing to have that kind of, competitive nature with us. But at the same time, it should be a healthy competitiveness and not a warmongering, very, that kind of competition. It should be, kind of like the military regiments and how they, they always brag to each other, oh, we're the best regiment. They're less good than us.
For sure.
But every regiment feels that, right? They
for
feel
sure,
like they're the special ones.
Yeah.
And I think that's completely fair. I think that's a great way. I mean, if you don't feel that way, then you're definitely going to get decimated in the military. You can't think, it's the whole mentality of, if you think you're going to die in battle, guess what? You'll get what you want. You're going to get your death in battle. So people that want to survive most of the time survive because they cower behind the rocks and they don't freaking pop their head out the freaking.
Yeah.
So it's the whole thing, right? You don't want to be, you want to have that kind of courage and the determinism of knowing what you have to do. And a lot of the time, the universe will provide as much as, the universe is a chaotic mistress. Sometimes she likes to see a hero win sometimes. And that's the really cool part I like about the universe, is that, she loves courage, and she'll reward courage, so that, if you go out in faith and you just step out and you do those courageous acts, you'll find that, you're not facing an enemy, you're facing your friends, you're facing, something that embraces you, right?
Right.
I think, that's a really cool thing about nature, have you ever had any experiences that have led you to think those things?
Well, I feel like just in general, like recently I've had a new spiritual thought towards nature, and I very very much enjoy the raw power of nature. Like I think that's the things I like the most in life, is the fact that nature doesn't really give a shit about you at all.
Yeah,
it'll do whatever it wants to do.
Right.
Like if you're in the wrong place in the wrong time, you're gonna die.
Right.
Like, it's just, and I very much enjoy that, just because, I don't know. To me, humans are just so insignificant. Like I don't believe in God, and to me, I find it funny how some people who do believe in God,
right,
they sometimes ask me, like, don't you find you need a purpose? Like, what's your purpose in life? And to me, it's just like, oh, how egotistical of humans to think that there's a God who gave him a purpose, who gave us humans certain purposes. To me, it's just to me. I mean, you can think that if you want, but to me, it's total bullshit. Like, you know how big the universe is? Like, who gives a shit about us? We're ants. We're just dust.
What do you think of the philosopher who said the notion to give life purpose, or if to have a purposeful life, is to give life meaning? So the meaning that comes from life is the meaning that you impose on it, or that it comes from you.
For sure, yeah. That makes sense. And I guess for those people, the meaning they put in themselves, they bring forward, is that to them that meaning comes from God, right?
Right.
To me, the meaning that I find in life is, because I find just everything in life just absolute, just it's just insignificant and useless. Like everything we do just doesn't matter at all. Like it's because nothing matters, might as well take time to nurture the relationships you have with your friends and your family.
Right.
Because to me, that's the only thing that is really worth doing, right?
Right.
So I don't know, that's, to me, I really enjoy the raw power of nature.
From nihilism back into the zen of the universe. Gilles has transcended
everything. That's the way I like to look at it.
That's interesting. It's fun to discuss, because I don't think we have a finite realization of the universe yet. So it's always fun to ponder. It's always fun to, ask what ifs, or to kind of, you ponder its possibilities. And, nature is ruthless,
for sure.
She can
as much
be
as it's
cruel,
ruthless, it does. She gives everything you need,
and she's beautiful. Right?
Yeah, as much as she gives, she'll take away. That's it. Like,
right.
As much as she gives, and she gives us everything, or else we wouldn't be alive right now.
Exactly.
She'll equally take it, and we'll go back to being nothing.
This is the kind of Zen Buddhism, when they talk about, without any of the good or without any of the bad, you wouldn't know what the good was.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
So without life or without death, there would be no life, because for one to exist, there has to be the other. And I think that that's a part of the beauty of it. You get to experience the universe. Maybe the universe, we're the universe conscious as itself, right? Maybe, and that's an interesting idea. I think Carl Sagan talking about how we're the eyes of the universe. If that's the case, that's a really powerful message. That's a really powerful idea, that we're the universe able to reflect upon itself, and that's basically us reflecting upon ourselves and the dichotomy of, good and evil, black and white, and, all the dichotomies of the universe, where there are dichotomies, and then there's the laws of physics, which, completely, really dumbfound us. And it's really amazing to see so many scientists talk about physics, and not, to me, they seem to talk about it in layman terms, like, oh yeah, that's just the way it is. But I'm like, well, the fact that those patterns are there, isn't that an amazing miracle by itself?
For sure, yeah.
Just the fact that, the universe exists with time, energy, space, and its relationship in between. I'm like, that's the miracle right there. We don't need to superimpose a God or any. This is it. We're living in the miracle. So I mean, this is the whole thing with physicists. Is some physicists do acknowledge that matter is magic, or the universe is a miracle by itself. But that's the thing. We don't need to superimpose any dogmatic religions or any kind of doctrines to it, because it's encompasses the whole thing. The whole play is the thing, right?
Yeah.
So it seems that it's all those religions are reductionist and very simplistic and very compartmentalized to the whole symphony of life, right? It's just one note, one tune playing all the other tunes, right?
For sure, yeah.
So that's a really cool idea. I mean, I like the idea, when the tree branch, there's a really cool story Terrence McKenna talks about, and it was a tree that vines were going all around the trunk, and then it was going up the branches, and then there was one branch that the vine didn't go up. It made an effort not to go in that direction and to take a different direction. And then he said, well, why would the vine do that? Why would the vine not go on that branch? It would make more sense. And then a few weeks later, the branch, with a big gust of wind, ripped off and it fell off. And so the vine really knew that tree branch was too weak to support it, and so that it went in a different way. And so that's really nature realistically understanding itself, and it being able to be so intelligent that it can recognize where it has to be, where it doesn't have to be. And when a fire starts in a forest, the trees can communicate through chemicals and through other ways, through the the mycelium networks underneath, and they communicate to the other trees, and the other trees start this reaction of shedding their seeds. So they and so these are like natural processes that nature does on itself.
For sure, yeah.
And this is like, nature is intelligent itself. If there's no proof of that, that's it, right? The fact that we're entire forests breathe in synchronicity, and they communicate from one end to the other. The trees can talk to each other. I mean, obviously rudimentary, not like human being communication, but at the end of the day, they can communicate. They can realistically control and impact the world around them. And that's nature's beauty for you. Nature is a lot smarter than we give it credit for. And when we talk about going to space and colonizing Mars, well, guess what? People talk about how that's a very humanistic thing, and not very down to earth, and by thinking of all of the rest of nature, and thinking, oh well, we can trash this place and then leave. It's like, well, not really, because when we're going to space, when we go to the moon, or when we go colonize Mars, guess what? We're going there with food. And what's food? Seeds, animals. So all of nature, nature's smarter than us. It's using us to move seeds around,
Oh,
plants.
absolutely, yeah.
So realistically, they're the smartest people of them all, because they've used us to go to become engineers, to become rocket scientists, to use metals so that we go to a different planet, and then we start the whole process of biological life on that planet. So now there's going to be trees there. There's going to be all seed plant life and all of life living there. And so that's the name of the game for biology, is we're in a process that wants an insurance policy. And that's kind of like what it is when Elon Musk's talk about, why should we go to Mars? It's like, well, it's an insurance policy for humanity. if the Earth is struck by a giant asteroid and, there's no, we're at a point where society collapses and we can't ever send rockets into the atmosphere ever again. That's a very real possibility. And, the scientists contemplate this as a reality where, if one nuclear Armageddon and, we will never be able to get back to the scientific process and the scientific advancement we have today, because we don't have all the materials and all the lithium ion would have been extracted from the earth so that we couldn't dig far enough to get more resources. So it becomes a real problem where we have one shot at, becoming a interplanetary species where we do have that insurance policy. If the earth is wiped out, life goes on. And
but it's interesting looking at it as a problem, because you can either look at it as a problem, or you can just look at it just being part of life, where if we're wiped out, well, we're wiped out. What do you want?
But this is part of the human drive, is this, we're so, we feel the need that the biology needs to go on.
For sure.
There has to be a progression, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good goal to have. And, maybe it is a futile goal at the end of the universe. All of energy will become dissipated, like entropy says. But realistically, it would be fun to go as long as possible and to get to the Star Trek point where we could really,
for sure,
go in and do some investigative journalism or some investigation and let's send ships in every direction and report back and say what we find. And, whatever we find, do we find telepathic beings like in Star Trek? What do we find? Or do we just find fish on Titan? So like it seems that the universe is so complicated and so chaotic that way that it is an opportunity for learning, or it is an opportunity for us to maybe, continue the endeavor and continue it. Maybe for ourselves, or maybe for the universe to just, the Zen Buddhists talk about how, we're in a simulation, or God's simulation, where he got bored of reality. So he started his own little Lego playset. And now he's going through a universe as multiple beings and multiple life forms, just for the sake of experiencing what it would be to be an individual in limited system.
Gotcha.
I'm like, it seems like that this religion is more advanced than simulation theory of Silicon Valley. But it's like it's a possibility. I mean, why not? I think that's it's, bring it to that idea to the table. It makes just as much sense, or if not more sense, than a lot of other things I've heard as propositions. It's quite possible that we think of reincarnation in the wrong way. We think of it as us, the individual, dying and going back and coming back. But it's really the universal spirit, or God for simplistic terms, transcends into human beings and puts his consciousness in all of the living organisms, just to feel those restrictions and to like start anew, because it's never fun. Sometimes when you play a video game and you get to the point where you've prestige, you have everything, and you're like, all right, let's start again. Wipe the whole thing, and we're gonna restart Skyrim from the start. Why? Because it's more fun.
For sure.
So maybe the God is just trying to entertain himself.
Yeah, it's possible.
In a simulation, and I'm like, hey man, that's
like, for sure. I know, like, and Sal's can attest to this. Shout out to Sal's, by the way, behind the curtain. I've made so many accounts on RuneScape just to go through Tutorial Island, just because it's just fun,
That's great.
Restarting it is fun restarting.
I mean, it's everything like the Honorobo. It's the cycle continues. The snake eats its tail.
For sure, yeah.
And the beautiful cycle continues. Well, I think we've hit a bit over an hour, so I think this is where we're going to leave it. Wow, that was quite a fun conversation. I had a lot of fun. It's never a dull moment with Gilles, so we're going to try and bring him back as soon as possible.
Sure,
I appreciate everybody for listening, to being here with us. I thank Gilles
thanks for inviting me.
Serge for helping us out with the tech. And every episode and every Tuesday. So you'll have an episode next week. And Thank you so much. I'll see you next round.
Nice.